Hey everybody, it's Crystal here, and everybody's been asking for the homemade cinnamon roll recipe, so I thought I'd just make a video, get it out of the way, be fast and easy and done. These are homemade, 100% yeast, all the good stuff. So as you know, yeast is something you have to be really careful with heat, and you're using ingredients to feed it and help it grow. And I have a thermometer here because your ingredients never need to get over 110 or it will end up killing your yeast, which will make it not work. It won't grow properly. So I've let this cool. This is 1 stick of butter, 2 cups of milk. I went ahead and used goat milk because that's what I have on hand. But you take your butter and your milk, and they have to be warm but not hot. Like I said, you want them right at around 110. And you're going to set those in the bowl together, and then you're going to get a 1/2 cup of sugar, and the sugar is what feeds and activates the yeast, and this just helps it work faster. So you'll take this 1/2 cup sugar, you'll mix it in your bowl. I'm going to scoot it a little closer. I know it's kind of a pain in the tush to see at that angle. So you're going to take your 1/2 cup sugar. You're going to mix all this together just a little bit because that liquid being warm will also help to break up the sugars and melt it down. And then you can either use the little individual packets of active dry yeast, or I actually have a container in the fridge, but I wanted to go ahead and use all these up. This was my pandemic purchase. I was scared everyone was going to decide to make bread. Haha, look at me, I was right, because this was the only yeast I could find. But I still have my other container in the door, so no big deal. But there's your fancy little yeast. You're going to dump the entire packet in here. And then you're going to do like 1 or 2 little easy stirs just to kind of spread all your yeast around. La la la, see it all floating there? I can scoot it a little closer right there. And after you put the yeast in here, you're going to do something called bloom your yeast. And that's why your ingredients are warm, and that's why your sugar was added. So I'm going to leave this alone to sit for 10 minutes to let my yeast bloom. And then I will turn you back on and let you see what happens. While I'm waiting on my yeast to bloom, I went ahead and measured out all my other ingredients. This is just 3 cups of flour, all-purpose, and you will add it first to your bloomed yeast as soon as your 10-minute timer goes off. And then after an hour of letting that rise, which I will show you in a minute when I mix it up, of course, but after you let that rise for an hour, you will add the final cup of flour. And to that final cup of flour, that's at step 3, you will add 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And I just like to go ahead and get everything pre-mixed and laid out in the very beginning. And then you'll need 2 teaspoons of salt. And this is actually kosher salt. And you will just incorporate all of that. So if you don't use this baking powder, I don't know who you are, but you will take this and you will stir it all together, and you add those at separate times just to let the yeast go ahead and rise those other cups of flour. But like I said, this way all my ingredients are already all prepped and ready, and as soon as that 10-minute timer goes off, then I can just dump this bowl in here, and then I just stir it, and then you just let it sit for an hour, and then you'll come back and you'll dump this bowl of all of the mixed ingredients in there, and you'll knead it in, and then you'll be ready. So I will see you in just a minute once my timer goes off. Alright guys, so our 10-minute timer has went off, and our yeast has bloomed. You can see it's kind of like foamy. That's how it's supposed to look. So good deal. And I just kind of stir it around just for, just for good times. And I go through and make sure there's not any clumps in there like these little couple that I just saw. you want it to all be dispersed evenly. Okay, so then I'm going to take my 3 cups of just straight scooped out flour. And you're going to take this and dump it in here with your wet ingredients. And I do it all at one time. Okay, so then you're going to take this and you're going to fold them together. And you're going to get kind of like a really wet dough, because remember, you're going to be adding another cup of flour in a little while. This is just to get this part risen. So you're going to stir all this together. It's going to be nice and wet. And then you're going to let it rest and rise. So as you can see, this is all in here. It's good to go. Now you will set a 1 hour timer and let this grow. So that's that for now. Okay guys, so as you can see, this has definitely well over doubled. So you're going to take that cup of flour, the teaspoon of baking powder, and 2 teaspoons of salt. And that, remember we mixed this all up in a bowl earlier. You're just going to dump that in there. I dump about half, and then I mix, and then I'll dump another half. But as you can tell, this dough, which I popped it, so now it'll kind of go back down, but it is still really wet, but it fluffied up really good. So you're going to take it, and it may act like it's not going to incorporate that whole cup of flour, but it will. Just takes a little work with it, and it doesn't have to incorporate the entire cup, because I'll show you why in just 1 second. Okay, so you can kind of see it's not wanting to suck that up, and I always keep my bar cleaned off because I just prefer to work with my bar versus the mat I have. So you're going to dump this, you're going to wiggle out a little bit of your flour first, then you're going to dump that on it, and you can see there's still some flour there. And so you're going to wipe your bowl down and get all that flour out, and then you're just going to go to town on this really super wet dough. And as that all gets in there, your dough will get the consistency you need it to be, and it's getting kneaded like it needs to be. And I just kind of do a push, pull, and kind of tuck. That's just how I've always worked with it since I've figured out how, because it's just a little easier that way. But I'm just gonna keep working it until I feel like it's kind of at the size I want it to be, or not so much size but wetness. And it's still a little wet, so I'm gonna go ahead and get in my flour container and just sprinkle a little more on here to work into it. And you can do that as long as you just use a small amount at a time, because you don't want to use too much, or then your mixture will become too dry. So I just kind of roll it around a little bit and play with it. So I've probably added about a 1/4 cup now. And it's getting a little easier to work with, a little less sticky. And when I started this, I had some butter in the microwave, and that is for the filling. So in a minute I'll go get that, because it was melting while I was getting ready to work on this. Because you'll want to mix your filling just a little bit beforehand, not much. But so it's still a little wet. I'm going to keep adding my flour just a little at a time. And it's okay if it's a little bit wet. You just want to be sure that it's not going to stick to your surface whenever it comes time to roll out. So I feel like it's getting to the consistency that we would like for it to be. And I'm going to go ahead and really heavily flour my bar. Now you do that because when you start rolling it, and I always pat it out first before I roll. And I always put a little top coat on, And then I will start with my rolling pin. Just kind of stretching it a little this way and that. And the goal here is to kind of make it a rectangle. So once I work it one way, then I usually will turn it and start working it another way. And keep in mind, this dough is really soft, because working with yeast dough, it's always a little soft. But this dough is just extra soft from the fact that we want it to be really good and soft. So I kind of work it like this. Like I said, you want it to kind of be a rectangle. Doesn't have to be. And this batch is going to be pretty thick. Not so much thick, but a lot more cinnamon rolls than my last roll was. Okay, and I kind of like it like this because I don't like getting too many swirls in it. So once I'm to this consistency, you can clearly see I can maneuver it very easily. You can see how big it is. So now I'm going to get this extra dough off my hands into my trash bowl over here. And then I'm going to do the last step. Well, next last step, which is make my filling. And you need 1.5 sticks of melted butter. And I'm melting it right now. So while I'm doing that, I can kind of push this together a little bit just to kind of keep my loaf, my little cinnamon roll log, in the same section or size. But you're going to take 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. So let me move my chocolate chips over here and get my brown sugar ready. So 3/4 cup brown sugar. And I always only end up being able to find 1/3 cup, go figure. And I always pack it up against the wall of these containers. This container is a lifesaver, but I'm going to wait until my butter is all melted. So, get this all nice and uniform and easy to work with. And while I'm at that, I can go ahead and get my cinnamon out. Ta-da! Lovely cinnamon. And I love these little square containers. They're just the Walmart brand, but they are really snazzy. So let me check that butter. Alright, so our butter is all good and melted. Then you're going to take your 3/4 cup brown sugar, which you guys heard me, that's not 3/4 cup. I just dumped it on the bar. Look at me go, trying to work around my dough ball there, which normally I would have this all mixed up beforehand, but I did not today because I didn't have my butter melted. I forgot. So there was the 1/3 cup. I'm going to go ahead and set it right here. I just don't want to put it on this because it's kind of warm. So right here's 2/3 cup, and then I need to add about 1/2 another one for good measure. Okay, and then I will take my cinnamon, and you really can't go wrong with cinnamon. The recipe only calls for 2 tablespoons, so I just kind of dip it in there, because really, what's it gonna hurt if you have too much cinnamon? Nothing, I don't think. It's just more cinnamony. So we'll take this and we will stir it together. I generally use something that I can spread it with on there, so I'm not dirtying as many utensils. So you will stir all this together and break up your brown sugar clumps, because if you've worked with brown sugar, you know you're going to have clumps of it. And then I scoop the thickest part of the mixture out. And I use my measuring spoon that I did my brown sugar with to do this. So, you take your brown sugar scoop and you get all the thick you can. And then you're going to put it just all over this cinnamon roll. your bread log anyway. And in just a second, you're going to spread it. Really kind of thin, not too thick. And you're going to have some of this left over. I always do anyway. And I just end up using it later on down the road on top of them once they come out of the oven. So now you'll take your spreader and you're going to spread the whole thing just all over, a real light layer. And this next step, you should be prepared to get messy because that's what's going to happen. But once you get all this spread, and as you can see, I still have a little bit of dough showing, so I'll tilt this up, scrape some more, mainly just the thick. I just like working with it better at this point. And then you spread it out. And it's okay if you don't get it everywhere. You just want to be sure you get it most of the places, because that is how you'll have your cinnamon and filling flavors. Okay, so you're going to take all this, and I have got it spread about as much as I'm going to bother with, because like I said, I take what's left of this container and put it on top. But now's the fun part. You're going to take this and you're just going to roll it, and you kind of want to keep it tight, but it doesn't have to be. And I kind of roll it just a little at a time like this and tuck. So you can tell kind of what I'm doing. Some people actually like use their arms to pull it, and I don't. But as you can see, that is totally puddling, and you will have a big mess on the bar by the time you get to the end of the roll, just from all that doesn't go in. So, whoop, let me get off the screen there. Ready? See all that goodness? So like I said, just be prepared for a messy bar when this is all said and done. Okay, now then I will kind of shimmy my log up the bar a little ways, which is always fun because you don't really want to mess it up, but you want to clean up your mess. So now that it's out of the mess, you will take your pan that you're going to use and you're going to grease it. And then let me get all this cleaned up and I'll be right back. Now that I have my pan out and it wiped up for the most part, I'm going to be a bad girl and use Pam to spray my pan. And you're going to take this lovely murderer knife. And actually some people use dental floss, but I just prefer a knife. And you're going to cut into about an inch thick sections. And I know you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, you're smashing those. And that is totally okay, and I'll show you why. So you just work your way all the way down your little loaf. It's okay if some of them are a little thick or some of them are a little thin. It's no big deal. And usually I end up throwing away the butts. But as you can see, I got that whole thing done. Then you're just going to come in here and you're just going to pick it up and you're going to lay it in your pan like that. And then you're going to have you this loosey-goosey little cinnamon roll, which is perfectly fine because they're going to continue to rise and fluff up. So you honestly don't want them too close together. They're kind of hard to pick up just because they're so doughy still. That's a good thing because you don't want a super stiff one. So I'm going to finish filling my pan and then I will tell you what to do next. Okay, so as you can see, I got that pan full and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to heat my oven to 350. Now the reason that you do this is because you want to let these pans rest while your oven is preheating so that your rolls can rise. Now your rolls need to almost double in size, which won't be hard for them to do because you've got that yeast in there. So you're gonna put the rest of your cinnamon rolls in there, and like I said, you just basically pinch them up and then work them a little bit once you get them into the pan. And then I generally set mine on top of the oven where the oven hole is, so that while the oven's preheating, it's also heating my cinnamon rolls up to help them finish their rise. I mean, and that's different for everyone. I don't know how your oven works. So I'm going to do that. But I'm going to also go ahead and tell you the next step. I'm going to cut this little tail off there so that cinnamon roll doesn't turn out weird. So the next step after cleanup is you're going to take some cream cheese. I take about a 1/4 cup. And you're going to melt it down and you're going to mix it with powdered sugar and milk. Now you mix this to your consistency. I just wing it every time. It's a little different how much I end up using. So I really can't tell you how much to use. But you will mix all that together and then you will drizzle it over the top of them once they're done. But you melt your cream cheese, and you don't have to use cream cheese. I prefer cream cheese icing. You can use just powdered sugar and milk if you would like to do it that way. I just prefer it to be a little cream cheesy. So that is it. That is the whole recipe. I'm going to post it for you. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm going to include a picture of them all finished in just a minute after they get their icing on. And you will bake these at 350 for 25 minutes once they have doubled in size. Like I said, that generally doesn't take very long, maybe 10 minutes. And then you're ready to put them in the oven. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you enjoy the cinnamon rolls. And I hope you guys have a good day. Bye.